So, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be discussing you got to harden up sometime. And we're talking about a book in this particular chapter. The author has named this chapter, I Need to Harden the Fuck Up. You need to learn how to embrace life when it sucks. Maybe you just did everything you could on an exam, studied every single day, never missed a class, went to the study groups, and still you wiggled out of the class with a C. Maybe you were in training camp, and this is notorious because we're football. Every time it comes to the conditioning drills, that's when life gets hard. People disappear. They don't want to practice because of this thing we call exertional pain. It's not pain in the joints, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, or bones. It's just, can you do it or not? You're exerting yourself. You're breathing hard. You have to learn to control your breath. You feel like you're dehydrated out there, short of breath. And some people stop because it just sucks or there's a little suffering involved. And if you're listening to this, these two episodes or chapters in the Sports Mastery Life or the Sports Mastery podcast, they kind of go together. Because last week we talked about suffering, and this week we're going to talk about suffering and how to deal with that when you feel a certain way. I have a wonderful guest on, Suhey Gomez. She is working on her master's and her PhD at the same time. Y'all know I find great talent, whether it's in the podcasting world, interviewing people, or in the sports world, and great students. So we have a great student on, and we have a future doctor in sports psychology. Tell everybody what's up, Suhey, and what you up to.
So, hello all. I am up to here being with Deshaun. I'm going to have a conversation with him. But as I mentioned last week, my happenings, I'm in school. It's called the Link program at John F. Kennedy University. I'm officially started my PsyD courses, which are the doctorate courses. So eventually I will be licensed and being able to help others enhance their mind and do good work in this lifetime.
See, I'm trying to help y'all. I have she will be a clinical licensed psychologist at some point. So we already envision this. We have this conversation. She really is already in her mind, and you have to see it and believe it before it actually happens. That's a different story, different episode. We'll get into that later. What I want to talk to you about right now is explain to the audience the difference in pain versus suffering.
So pain is, as we can think of, like the physical, the things that are like the ligaments. If you're having not fatigue is more suffering. So when we talk about pain, you're looking at more the physical thing, whether it be you're injured, something actually physically that's happened to you, that's pain. That's not the exertion that we're talking about when it comes to suffering. When it comes to like suffering, you're looking at things that are more psychological, more the thoughts of escape or that anger or the burning muscles, the frantic breathing. Those are the suffer fest, as in the book that we're talking about, which is called The Brave Athlete, Calm the F Down by Marshall and Peterson. That's the difference in pain. Pain is that physical, getting injured where you no longer can go anymore because you're physically in pain. Then versus the suffering, or in this book, as they call it, the suffer fest, is really that the pain that you're feeling when, say, you're running a marathon, the pain that you're feeling when those thoughts and behaviors and actions when you're in the hurt and the suffer of the sport. That's the big difference from like the physical to the physical to the psychological part of the difference between the two.
So the pain might be something where you tweaked an ankle, or you rolled an ankle, or like a partially torn quad or a partially torn hamstring, and you're kind of trying to play through it, or you get a hip flexor or something like that in the middle of the game, and you can't raise your knee up as high as you would like to. And then on the suffering end, it could just be you're running up and down the court. There's no whistle. Or it could be that you have a stub that we can't put in the game, so you have to stay in. You can't come out, and then you just have to control your breathing. It's a matter, and that's the part that becomes psychological. And it's interesting us having this conversation because I've been sharing concepts of this particular chapter in our prior conversations with a few of my athletes, and I've told them these are 8th graders, and I'm like, with my running back, I played running back, I played receiver, but my running back, he's a little guy. He is the best running back, probably the best athlete on the team. If we were to stop the season right now, he would get offensive MVP. Pokey, what's up? But I've been telling him, you're not coming out the game at running back. You're going to have to suffer. You're going to get tired, but we can't have a drop off. We trust you even when you're tired. And he has been embracing that to the point that we started the season 0 wins and 3 losses. And now we've won our last 3. So last Saturday we won. The Saturday before that and the one before that we won. So people are starting to suffer a little bit because they did it all in preseason in the conditioning. And we're telling them it's no same. You just have to keep it up. And what'll happen is the other team, they feel the same way. They're suffering too. So it really comes down to when you're tired, who can suffer longer. And we're starting to see the benefits of our labors and our thought processes.
Yeah, and I'll add something before my thought flies away. I just captured it. Here it is. That what you were bringing up about the who suffers more or who can suffer the most when it comes to the teams. And I brought this up last week, and they also talk about it in the book about how do you prepare to get into that suffer fest? How do you get better to start accepting or being more mindful or being okay with embracing the suck? And one of the ways that the authors talked about was doing more of that. Doing more. If you're looking to get better at that, get yourself in that situation more and more, get that team more and more to do the suffering part of it, to get them to really increase their threshold when they're in that game, to be able to be more familiar with it and be able to do it more and more, and go through the suffering. So it becomes part of their threshold, becomes part of them that they just accept and do and know that's only temporary. So that is one way that resonated with me, what you were saying, also with connection to the book about how do you get better at accepting that suffering. Just do it more and get yourself in the situations more to increase your threshold.
Yeah, and I agree with you because it pretty much begins to desensitize you to the situation when it comes about. And that's when practice becomes more important. And coaches, if you're listening, you have to be detailed where you have to simulate, let your starters run 10 plays or 15 plays at a time where they run and get back to the huddle or they run and line back up. We're talking football. So they get used to that, what it's going to feel like exactly on game day. And then maybe you add the defense to it. And then there's a term in football, it's called thud, where you get up to the person, you tackle, you block them, but nobody goes to the ground. But you make impact at close to a game speed without anybody getting injured. So that's a way to simulate, but you have to do these things hard. You have to do them at full speed, and you have to really simulate game-like conditions. So I think you're hitting it. That's right on point. What's your thoughts on the science of pain and suffering, Suhei?
I think one of my thoughts is that through obviously pain, don't go through the pain when you're actually hurt, you're physically hurt. But when it comes to science of suffering, one thing that science does shows is that you're not going to die from suffering. You're not going to die from maybe the breathing, the muscle fatigue. Our brain is not going to let us do that. And this is science-based that you're going to be okay. It's just coming to learn how to utilize that suffering to enhance your performance. I think that's a beautiful take on it because a lot of times, and I think even also giving yourself that thought or, that feeling inside, accepting hey, I'm suffering right now, but I'm not going to die. I'm not going to fall forward and not ever be here again tomorrow, because part of the suffering is not going to let your mind's not going to let you die in that moment. It's obviously major things or physical things, but I think that's a pretty good little token when it comes to science. Like, I know thinking about, right, this is just temporary. This is just a run that I have to do, or a training session I have to do. Yes, I'm suffering through the pain, but I know I'm going to be okay. I just need to learn how to cope with it better, how to be able to prevent it more, or get myself more in the situation so I feel more comfortable going through the suffering in order to enhance my performance and get to where I want to go.
Right. And I agree with you 100%, especially working with young people at middle school and the high school level. It often gets theatrical. And what I mean by that is, like, or I can remember early on in the preseason, the conditioning period, we always would have these same guys, and they were obviously overweight. They were the linemen.
Mm-hmm.
But we get into the conditioning and they're always last, and that doesn't bother us. We just want you to finish and keep going. Just don't stop. But it was always one or two kids that we would get into the conditioning and they were just to get to crying all the time. And I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? You're crying about something that you need. You're crying about something that's good for you. It's not like we took a belt out and we're spanking you. What are you crying for? Just suck it up and breathe. I'm like, this makes no sense to me. But that same guy is sticking it out. He's still on the team, and he's a factor for us on the offensive line. And that is a win for us coaches, is being able to talk to the kids before, after, and during practice and tell them the things that we're doing is good for you. It's going to help you on the field. It's going to help you in life. And then you're going to lose some weight behind what you're doing. You know, so that's the wonderful part about what we have going on. And sometimes us as coaches, we have to suffer foolish personalities. And that goes with some athletes, that goes with dealing with some parents, and it also goes with us dealing with ourselves. So we have to know what it's going to be like when a certain type of a coach is in a stressful situation, or a certain type of player is in a stressful situation, and then be able to guide everything accordingly so we have a good outcome. And the outcome is having no one quit and everybody there, you know, at the end of the season like they were at the beginning. And it's working so far. So there's lessons in all of this if you're listening as a sports parent or as a coach. If you've never really suffered and you're hearing us talking about suffering, and you know that there's going to be a conditioning period, or you know that you have to just do some things to failure to get better. And you mentioned this before, you know, when you anticipate a suffer fest or a pain fest, you know this is going to be a hard workout. You know, we have extra wind sprints after practice. It's early in the week. It's Monday or Tuesday. Game isn't out until Friday. Feels like it's a year away, and we got to do all these things in between. What is an action plan for young people to learn how to suffer better? How would you consult with them on that, if you will?
I think one, as I mentioned previously, experiencing it more. Two, also in the book, and all the stuff that we're talking, well, at least I'm talking about, is coming from this book. So another one is feed forward, which really I translate that to imagery. Being able to see, like, knowing when the person knows the end, when the end's gonna come, you have the ability to be able to start like preventing and seeing yourself, like how long I will be suffering or I'll be in this play. There is something about a psychological that your mind being able to see and knowing the time, how long it's going to take, allows you to cope and be able to deal with and be able to embrace that suffering more often than not. And if you did not know how long you were going to be in this play or in this performance. So I would definitely, I think when it came to like this strategy of starting to prevent or be able to prepare yourself for the suffering or the pain, it would be looking at like imagery, or that what they call the word feed forward, to be able to see what, feeling it, seeing it, touching it, what it's going to feel like before actually happening, and knowing how long you're going to be in that suffer fest.
Yeah. And one of the things that I would often tell my athletes, like, listen, man, Practice is only 2 hours long. You're leaving. We start at 5. You will be out of here at 7. Deal with this until 6:59. You know it's going to end. It's not going to last all freaking night. And sometimes kids, they just don't understand that. So we have to try to, in our best way, put that into perspective. It's only 2 hours, or it's only 90 minutes.
Right.
That you have to go through this. So it's temporary.
Yep.
That suffering is temporary. That pain is temporary. But what can you learn from it? What can you learn about yourself?
And I think another thing that comes up for me too when you're talking is like even asking, pulling them aside or in due time, like, what do they, even though they might not know, but at least getting them to start to think, like, what do they think they can do better to be able to help themselves and not being so afraid or just feeling a certain way about the 2 hours that I have to go through this training session. Like another thing that a strategy they can think of is acceptance, and also looking at, like I mentioned before last week, fragmentation, where, you little bit by little, it might be that the student or the athlete may say, like, I don't know, maybe instead of running 2 laps, I could only run 1. Okay, what can we do to meet you in the middle for that? Like just bringing the safe space between like the coach, the moment, and the athlete to allow them to feel more like you got this. Like don't compare yourself so much, or seeing like I got to run 5 miles. Well, okay, what can we do to get you to consider, or how can we help you more to maybe just run 1 mile? Just kind of throwing things out there, but again, breaking the event or the situation or the sufferfest into pieces for them to be able to understand. And really, as I go back to the basics, like just showing that you're there and you see the struggle possibly, and being able to say, I'm here for you. I care for your enhancement. So let's talk about it to see how we can best support you in this space.
Right. So, if you're listening, I'm here. I care about you. So what I want you to do is pull out a sheet of paper, and on the left side, write how it went down. On the right side, write engineer suffer session and draw a line across, and then draw a line down the middle. And then 2 inches apart, write a number 1, another 2 inches down or spaces, write a number 2 and a number 3. So take a moment to recall up to 3 examples when you last suffered and why. Now, when you have completed your list, describe a training session that would force you to encounter it more often. This is what we call an engineered suffer session. So what I want you to do is try to make the training session match the type of suffering listed. For example, you might schedule a long break to force you to cope with general fatigue. Or you could deliberately schedule a hard session when you know motivation is low. You might do an interval session in which you attempt to hold PR level splits or meet wattage goals to increase the likelihood of failure. This is called sometimes mental toughness sessions, because the goal is simply to cope. Nothing else matters except getting through the session. Now, I like this. This is a good exercise. It's something that I did myself. Hitting the bag. I might just hit the punching bag and try to hit the bag for 2 minutes straight, as hard as I possibly can. Great cardio. And then do 10 rounds of that for like anywhere from 2 minutes, rest a minute, and then punch it hard for 2 more minutes. And the first time I only got 3 rounds. The next time it was 4. Now I can get up to 5 or 6 rounds before, I'm completely done. But those are things that I like to do to challenge myself, to keep my cardio going, and then just mix it up from my regular boxing training sessions. What's your thoughts on this suffer sheet or this assignment, Suhei? How can you explain to the audience and the folks listening how this would benefit them?
Yeah, I think the way it can benefit is exactly what you mentioned when it comes to engineering the suffering session. What that means is that you're basically creating it intentionally to suffer in the session, but with focus and attention and per se a goal in mind of helping you get into that space more and more. I think there's a beauty in focus and attention in actually wanting to put yourself deliberately into a session of suffering on purpose so you can get used to it and grow from that. And it become, as all things, as you more consistency, the more you do, the more it compounds. Like, for example, if I'm going to start, even for me in general, though my rhythm with studying, I found my rhythm of consistently writing in my planner. I'm talking about basics. It's something that came up right now. I've gotten so used to on a consistent basis to have a planner and to keep myself organized that it has become part of me, has become part of my engineered way of doing things to be able to be the best that I can as a student. So I think a lot of times we don't, as people, we don't really intentionally think about, okay, I want to get better at this, therefore I should probably do this more and more. Because we just don't know. We're not aware that that might help. But this is why you have us and you have books and you have people
That's
you can
right.
connect with about this. So I think this sheet, again, going back to what I've talked about before, the beauty of sitting down and going through this, being able to have those top three of when you were suffering, whatever it is for that athlete, performer, or individual, and then looking at doing that again, but adding a little like notch to it or level up to be able to suffer a little bit more or to get used to that, to get more, better at being less fatigued next time you run or next time you hit the bag or what have you. There is a beauty in sitting down and going through this and really being intentional about it. So I think there's a reason why there's a suffer sheet. There's a reason why it's here, and there is science backing this up when it comes to engineering your suffering session.
Yeah, because if you think about it, perspective is everything. And then for some people, perspective is reality. So then when you get this moment or you start feeling a certain way that life sucks or this sucks, you think about it, it brings about an emotional response. Mm-hmm. So at least let's desensitize ourselves to certain or emotions, or when those emotions come up, we have a plan B and C, and it's not a plan A of just to quit or stop. How can you figure out a way to keep going because you feel a certain way, and now you have to think outside of the box or get outside of yourself to know that this is me. I can go further. I don't have to stop right now, or even asking yourself, why do I feel this way? Mm-hmm. So this is a wonderful episode. I'm glad y'all were able to join us today. Again, we have Suhey Gomez on. Suhey, before we close out, what final message would you leave the Sports Mastery audience?
I think this, with tying back to what we talked about, like all of this, we're talking more like the mind, the mindset, how to increase your mental toughness. I definitely would say not take for granted the beauty that your feelings and your thoughts and your behaviors are all connected, and that through the mental part of your mind, you can get through and enhancing your performance. Specifically in this case, obviously embracing that suck or embracing the suffer fest. So I would say definitely consider how your thoughts are impacting how you feel, and how that's showcasing on your behavior and how you act out in the field. There is importance in that space, and just keep moving forward.